Well, hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Exceptional Living, where we purpose to have exceptional conversations about life, work, and our place in this world. Our purpose is to inform, to inspire, and to ignite the greatness that lies in each one of you. And of course, in this world where we're so often asked or headed to fit in, to form, to conform to the world and its thinking, you, each and every one of us, was designed to stand out, to be unique by design and by purpose. So, our show always brings you the best, the best, the best, the best. And I can be biased in this with our special guest today, but you're going to hear life changing concepts, strategic insights, intentional tactics, and proven tools from world-renowned leaders, experts, innovators, creatives, all to equip and to empower you to live an exceptional life, unique by design. And today, my very special guest, who I am honored to have as a guest on our show, Mr. Professor, the intellectual pundit, Siphamandla Zondi. Welcome, Professor.
Oh, hi. Good afternoon from this side of the African continent, dear my sister, Dr. April Ripley. It's a great honor. It's a great honor to connect with you this afternoon. Beautiful afternoon on this side.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to give a formal introduction because I want everyone to know who we have today. Siphamandla Zondi is the director of the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation at the University of Johannesburg, which is dedicated to finding solutions to challenges facing Africans anywhere and everywhere in the world. He is the co-director of the Institute for Global African Affairs, a joint entity of the University of Johannesburg and the University of the West Indies in Barbados. The latter institute runs a master's program on global Africa and pursues research and dialogue, the aspirations of all Black people in the world. His professorship is in politics and international relations at the University of Johannesburg. Zondi serves as a trustee of the International Third World Leadership Association, which champions leadership development for the Global South. And as a commissioner in South Africa's National Planning Commission, Zondi leads work on international cooperation that enhances the quality of life. His work is dedicated to the rebirth of Africa and formerly colonized world for the betterment lives of the world across the world renowned. His beautiful wife, whom I had the privilege of meeting, Nomuso, and two lovely daughters, I sure a testament to this. But beyond all of that, in his accolades, I believe he is one of the most brilliant minds of the 21st century and beyond. And so, Exceptional Living, I present Professor Siphamandla Zondi. Oh, Professor, we call you.
Great. No, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, yes. So, this show is all about living an exceptional life. And just reading a brief bit of your bio, your life has been one that has been unique and certainly exceptional by design. Share with us a little bit about your journey and what's guided you into the path that you find yourself on now.
Yes, no, thanks so much, Dr. Ripley. My story is a story of the African people generally, and it's a very common story for Black people in the world. And it's also a very huge and common story for all marginalized people in the world. You have to be exceptional because the conditions require you to do. It is not a choice. It's not some thing you take because you want to. It's nice to have and stuff like that. In order to succeed in a world where you are born into disadvantage, you just have to be exceptional in the sense that you have to break the boundaries and break the limitations and break the ceilings of life in order to live a life that is meaningful. And therefore, to simply live a life that is meaningful requires us to operate in the exception of all the limitations, to operate against all odds, and 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 to push our way in and wedge our spaces into all sorts of sorts of areas. So it becomes almost an inborn thing for people like myself to really just break ground. Now, I'm born in the countryside of South Africa, which is a country in the southeastern part of of Africa, and I'm born in a village. I grew up shepherding cattle and sheep and goats. I grew up interacting with nature on a daily basis. Walk into the wilds, hear the birds, deal with wild animals. I was also born in a village which was also had a lot of westernization, so a lot of schools, um, and a lot of facilities, some technological advancement in all of that. So I had to live in both worlds from a very small young boy, from a family of six, which is five boys, and the last born is a girl. Was treated like a princess in the house, and then we had to work very hard, had to do all the house chores, had to do everything literally in the house because there were no boys, no girls in my mom's home. So we had to learn all sorts of things. So right from the word go, didn't know what I was not allowed to do, and didn't know what I was not supposed to do. I had to do everything just to be an okay member of my family. I just needed to serve in all of those. And also in the community, you have to work across the board, work in the fields, planting crops and stuff, and work in the feeding field where we kept animals and work with others and all that. I then became an African child. An African child is a child that is brought up not by their parents, but brought up by the community. They are not brought up by the normal affairs of the home, but brought out by the experiences of living with others, living for others, and letting others live together with you in the community. That was very early on. For example, when my family, who lived with my grandmother and my uncles and stuff, when they had to have their fields planted, we got neighbors, three, four other families, to work with us to plant our big fields. And then after we finished our household, we go to the neighbors' work. We all go there and plant their field, and we do the same for everybody else. And that was a normal thing. That and when we have salt and they have pepper, they give us a little bit of their pepper, we give them a bit of their salt. So there was this idea, it came in a proverb, that a plate that goes with one hand comes back in another hand with something else. So that was practical living, and all of that. So, and I went through school, then went all the way through university. I already had this advantage in my disadvantage. Being socioeconomically poor, coming from a relatively poor family, was a form of a disadvantage, but I had an advantage. The advantage of having lived with others, the advantage of having learned the principles of true success, which is to succeed together with others rather than succeed against others or succeed at the expense of others, but succeed together with others. Cooperative work and stuff like that. I had that advantage already going to school, and that helped me to do well at school, though I had all these disadvantages. And for me, the biggest story about our lives is that we prevailed, and not by accident, but because the life on the margins prepared us for any adversity in the world. When we hear about the story of the enslaved African people throughout the world, one of the things that comes up is this, that their huge difficulties prepared them for a life after slavery, which would be difficult still. But they had this inbuilt resilience that is produced by the life of adversity that they had had. We would learn to turn adversity into a sort of a university of life. And that is what we needed to do. To this day, very positive, very excited, very passionate about what we do, because we'd learned to turn any adversity into a lesson of life.
Wow, there was so much in there, Professor. And I'm always taking copious notes. And I remember the first time that I heard you speak at the Global Leadership Conference, and everyone was taken aback. Not just by your knowledge, as we just heard, but by your ability to malang concepts, find the commonality, but the village. We hear about it takes the village to raise the child, and you spoke to that just now about the importance of community and the African child, the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are, and even the work that you did as a young man, but that values, those norms that were part of that community culture stayed with you through your matriculation and college. I love that you said that it was a disadvantage to some. It's how they perceived it, but to you it became an advantage for where you would go into life. And oftentimes we look at different things in our lives, maybe our race, maybe our gender, our socioeconomic present state, and say this is a disadvantage. But what you said you learned was how to live with others. And what a world we're living in now, where this
Yeah.
becomes more poignant and certainly more pensive and important, and how to succeed together. Um, and so even in the work that you're doing, Professor, I want you to share a little bit about that as well. Why is it especially important now for the work that you're doing with the university and also with the university in the West Indies, not just for Africa, but for the global South? And talk a bit
Yes.
about
Yeah, yeah. No, no. The principles that we live together and that we thrive together, and that true success is to help us others succeed alongside with you. It's a true university of life, because that's exactly the time and tested principles by which ancient Africans lived, by which ancient Asians lived, ancient people, indigenous people of North America lived, and that what helped them through all circumstances. Um, our ability to cooperate and work together and pull together is an ability that is in short supply because of our modern system. And our modern system is built on individualism and indivisibility of the individual and their role in society, and often isolated from others, on in silo, and that promotes an attitude that you could actually succeed on your own, and that you can be one who stand out instead of standing up together with others. That principle is pretty much built into our system today. As a result, the curriculum at school level and at university level is one where you are actually preparing society in future for that particular mode of life, excessive individualism. But what we do need, and what we try to do, what the university enables us to do, and working in this environment I work in, is that I spend a lot more time with teenagers than parents do with their own kids, because I have like 8 hours with them, and the parents are going to see them after school, and they're going to see them for 3, 4 hours. But so I have a greater responsibility
that.
to train them to become better human beings in life before they become a better boy or a better girl, or become a better engineer or a better leader, whatever they must be. They have to be better human beings. They have to understand what it means to succeed as a human being, as different from other forms of being. So we have a lot of work with young people, from undergraduate level all the way to graduate level, where we don't only just teach them the concepts and the big words and theory, but we actually challenge them about what does it mean for them to be themselves. What we found, Dr. Ripley, it is not the IQ that people have to chase after. It's not their biggest challenge. The IQ, they easily get it.
Mhm.
What people have to struggle with is accepting who they are and understanding who they are. This is because our education system teaches us how to understand the environment, how to understand water, understand chemicals and all that, and
Yeah.
not how to understand you. So in the end, you come out with a PhD in biology, animal biology, wildlife biology,
Mhm.
in politics and all that, and know everything else except you.
Mhm.
And that is what we try to do. Say, what if these people who must be good engineers were to understand themselves a little better and not assume that they know who they are? Because we know the biggest differentiator between nations that have grown significantly in the past 70 years and nations that have grown slower. The ones that have grown slower are those where the people have less confidence in themselves, their ideas, their thinking, their possibilities, because they come from a history which has taught them that they are lesser human beings than the others on the basis of the skin color, instead of their gender, on the basis of where they're born. And that is a big thing facing education. The students don't fail literally because they don't get the material proper, but they don't get the attitude correctly. They don't get the oomph they need, the confidence they need so that they can actually succeed in life. So this is what keeps me going a lot, because a part of that is teaching and a part of that is research. Research, you go to community, exactly as you do in your program, and you go to communities, solve people's problems, deliver food and all that. But we then get knowledge from them, which we will then use to explain why is it their interventions against poverty, but poverty persists. Why is it that the interventions against inequality, but inequality persists? Why is it that they still a shortage of sanitary services, and so on and so on, so that we can provide solutions in society that will help us meet the expectations of one of the most important African proverbs. This African proverb, the people of the Southern Nile, they say, Dr. Ripley, take care of Earth, not because it was handed down to you by your grand by your grandparents or by your parents, but take care of Earth because it was lent to you by your grandchildren and great grandchildren. So we owe it to the next generation, not to the past generation, to do well.
That Professor, that's so true. Reminds me of two things, and I know you've done study on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. here from Atlanta, and we're still going to work on that.
Yes.
But one of the things he said about education, and really what you've expounded on, is that the function of education is to teach one to think intensively, he said, and to think critically, so that it's intelligence plus character. And that's the real true goal of education. And so you spoke to this, right? Identity. And in some of my work, we talk about cultural intelligence, the key dimensions of culture. And in one of those deals really with what you've been talking about today, first starting with identity, how I see myself. When we talk about negotiations and we're working with different groups, we talk about our mirror. New Testament, Paul says, I look into the mirror. I look at me first, not in a selfish way, but if I do not know who I am as an individual, my
Yes,
identity, that
yes.
because that colors everything about what I'll do, certainly what I believe first. So who I believe myself to be, and my ideology, my philos, my philosophy is what I will live
Yes,
out. And
yes.
so, in the work that you do in consulting, and as you said, because you spend so much time with these young people, that you're
Mm,
teaching them not just the letter of what they're learning, but the
mm.
spirit of what they're learning
Spirit.
as it
Yes,
connects to them and their identity. And
yes.
I wrote this quote down because this is what I first audience, exceptional living. I heard him say in this presentation, and he quoted President Nelson Mandela. And he said, like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the action of human beings. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. And that's what you quoted, Professor, in Nassau, Bahamas. And I said, this is it. And that's what your work has been. That's what your work has been. But we know that it has not all been easy. And there have been some setbacks, maybe some detours. Yes. But what did you learn? What can you share with us about when the setbacks come, when the disappointments come?
When you mention Martin Luther King, and you mention him alongside Nelson Mandela, and then you can mention them alongside a few other people. What makes them significant is the fact that they use their brain, but they also use their spirit, and then they use their relational intelligence in order to impact other people significantly. But the crisis today is that the entire knowledge system, the entire marketplace, even the entire NGO sector and nonprofit sector is built on the assumption that IQ is the most important form of intelligence, and therefore you undermine the importance of the social intelligence, cultural intelligence, spiritual intelligence, relational intelligence, and other forms of intelligence that make a human being a full being. And because of that, we are unable to reproduce after their kind, because we are producing people who are really great on paper, who can master any equation you give them, but will not master the mysteries of how to make life meaningful for other people. We can solve for X, but we cannot solve for greatness. You can solve for Y, but you cannot solve for impact and making a difference in society. And for me, that is one of the biggest challenge facing us, which is what perhaps we should learn both from the words of the great who have come before us, and the actions and conduct that they use to convey that very same message. But it's much easier for us to listen to their words, and they sound nice, but not fully internalize them so that we are able to apply them. And that, for me, is one of the biggest challenges that we face. How do you get a young person who's 4, 5, 6, 7 years right now to not just learn small little things, but learn the profound things about how to live from the wisdom even you were quoting just right now? Education is not about training for skills. The biggest skill that must come of education is character, because character would change everything, would change the skill I have, would change how I use the technology I access, would change how I use the resources that I have. When I get opportunities, I would know what to do. I will never be not ready for an opportunity that comes if I have the character for success, for successful living, for exceptional living. It's very important. It's a character issue, and therefore it's a very complex issue. It's not an easy thing to build.
It is not. Professor, there's, I guess, when you look back at it, because we sometimes make life so complicated, because sometimes we have a lot of education. Yeah. But it goes back to fundamental foundation, where the first school of instruction is in the home, in the community, which you shared earlier. And research has shown that within the first 5 to 6 years, children develop their beliefs, their character, their morals. This is the inculturation, one of the dimensions of culture. And I love the African proverb. I remember when I was visiting the Saidi, and it says, a man without culture is like a zebra without stripes, or a zebra for those who. but culture is so much of
Yes.
us.
Yes.
It's not just our dress. It's not just the visible parts of culture, but it is the
Yes.
things, our values, our belief systems. It is our identity. So culture helps to craft this for
Yes.
us. And so, as you said, we have to develop the person. Dr. Miles Monroe, who I know, you're part of his organization, would often share in his
Yes.
last book that he presented before his transition,
Uh,
Power of Character and Leadership.
uh,
And I believe you were there. He stressed the entire conference. It's like, how do you have a conference all about leadership and character?
yes.
But he did. And he was reminding us of what you just said, Professor, that we can be intellectually brilliant, but if the character does not match it, and we've seen this in world leaders, we've seen this in CEOs, we've seen this even at the community level, even in families, right? But that's not to say
Yes.
that we can't miss it, right? There could be decisions that we make that are not the best decisions. But part of that character development is to own up to it, right? To admit it, to be self-aware, to
Yes.
be forgiving, and then repentant. So we change not just the action, but also our way of thinking about it, right? As the wise man said, as a man thinketh in his heart. So this is his belief system. So that man or
Yes.
woman is. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
even as you've come, and this is part of, I know what you're doing, not just in South Africa to community, but even in your work in government, in consulting. Share with us a little bit about some of the trends. And I don't, people say trends. I don't really like just the word trend, but what do you see moving forward? Let's look forward and forecast. What are maybe 3 things that would be at the top of your list for individuals, corporations, government, education? Just what are the things we need to be preparing for? And also, what are the things we need to hold on to? There's some things we need to let go of, but there are also some
Yeah.
things we need to hold on to. What would those be for you?
I think uh, at the rate at which things are changing right now, and having just come out of a global financial crisis, and just come out of the COVID crisis, and confronting many other crises, energy crisis. You have an energy crisis in this country, food crisis all over the world, crisis of identity, crisis of confidence, crisis of desperation, all sorts of things. We have learned just this one thing for me that we need to kind of do. We're going to need resilience well into the future, but we're going to have to interpret what does resilience then mean in our environment. What is this that enabled some people, among whom are those that were born of, to live through the worst of times, the most difficult of times, and thrive to the best of times again? And in other words, to live through the cycles of life, the ups, the ebbs and flows. How? What is it that we should build in our character, in our attitude, in our choice making, in our decision making, that would enable us to defy the odds of time? So, what is this resilience we need to build? And what is it in our history and what those who have come before us have learned that we can learn from that past in order to see a better future? In West Africa, there is a symbol called sankomfa. So it's a symbol of a little cock, and it's facing backwards. It's a little chicken that's facing backwards, and it's standing with its head facing backward. And it's sankomfa, which is you look back to draw as much as you can draw without turning back. You look back not to turn back. You look back in order to forge forward. But you look back because there's some things that you need to draw from the past. I mean, even the stories of the Bible, the story of David, His greatest exploit is that behind him was an experience with a bear, experience with a lion that had prepared him for an experience with Goliath. Now, the Goliaths that are coming, we don't know. It was COVID in the past 2 years, but perhaps it might be earthquake. It might be massive hunger. It might be anything else. How do we prepare ourselves for that eventuality today? In the manner in which we put our character, work on our conduct, on our orientation and our decision making. For me, the second one, the stuff that we need for the future, is this ability to harness travesty, to harness difficulty, to harness crisis in order to create new possibilities. There's an ancient saying again of the people of the of Somalia that says, these people were throwing stones at me and uh, trying to put a heap of stone over me, and they didn't realize that they were giving me stones to step on as I rise higher. So there's an attitude of seeing adversity as an opportunity that might be used. And that is what we learned with COVID. Those who saw opportunities in that to thrive, for self-development during this isolation, to rebuild the bonds with their friends, with their families, and those who decided to learn and read, came out of COVID a lot stronger than those who wallowed in pain and worry and fear during this time that consumed them and therefore weakened them for post-COVID. And the last one for me is to understand the art of doing the best with all the abilities that we have. One of the greatest abilities we have, Dr. Ripley, is this, that we have this ability to use our mind at the same time as the ability to use our heart. And it's perhaps one of the life-changing experiences for people who live exceptionally, that they have this ability to balance the issues of the heart and the issues of the mind and use those to their best of their ability, because so many of our challenges have to do with the fact that we lack the balance. We use one over the other, and the system has told us that one is more superior than the other, when actually by our wiring, we're wired to use both, which is why the Bible talks about loving Lord your God with both your heart and your mind. We know how to love with our heart, but loving with our mind, it's a little bit more difficult. We would live a world a little better if we learned to love also with our mind, and not simply think with our mind, but also love with our mind, and not simply feel with our hearts, but also think with our heart. And if we could get that balance right, we would be better human beings, not the human beings that our systems are creating now, which are human beings that are fit for labor. They are human beings that are fit to serve someone else. They are fit to follow, not to lead, not to make a difference, not to be change makers in life. If we could do that, I think we will help the world be better than what we found it.
Wow. Resilience, harnessing adversity. How will you perceive crisis? As opportunity. And the art of using our heart and our mind. And all these speak towards something we call emotional intelligence. It's not a new concept, but when you're talking about thinking with your heart and loving with your mind, it reminded me of that. And we have to use that so much in both of our works. Is the first point of it is what? Understanding ourselves. So when I'm confident and sure of who I am, my dignity to life, respect, consideration as a human being, not just doing, but a human being. That's the first. And then I look to my neighbor, who is my neighbor, right? My village, my community. And it begins even with people in the home, our family, extended families. So sometimes we think, well, I'm thinking of my business, or it starts with the people where you live. and seeing the world through their eyes.
Through
So,
their eyes.
through their eyes. So when I'm training on cultural awareness and cultural intelligence, it's really interesting, Professor, because I know what I think, but I don't know what you think. So trying to get others to see that you may have a perspective that someone else does, and being open to hear, to learn, to sit, and to converse. Um, Again, I'll go back to something Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and he was talking about, why was there so much hatred during the civil rights movement? And I know there's some, congruency in what happened in South Africa with apartheid. But oftentimes hate comes from fear, and that's from anger. It's like an inner frustration because you don't know something. So you said people hate each other because they fear each other, but they fear each other because they don't communicate with each other. And so it's open to dialogue. So I have to sit down with you, Professor. I met last year at we have a new center. So when you come, you definitely have to visit, you and the girls, called the Center for Human and Civil Rights. And there's an organization from the Middle East that is called Shiraka, it's an NGO. But that's what their goal is to sit down with Arabs and Jews, and they have these conversations. And it starts on a cultural, social level to better understand, to at least engage in dialogue. Because all of us at our core, Maslow's needs. We think about, Maslow and the needs. We want to belong, it's identity, we want to beget, we want to have, to be appreciated, to be recognized, again, for dignity. And I know you've done a lot of work with that. But our future is calling for us. When you shared about resilience and Sankofa, to look back, to your head, to see what was behind, to see the path that's been laid, but to keep moving forward. So your body moves forward because you can't rest in the past. You still have to move forward. That was very powerful in tying that in. So much, Professor. So much. I know our time is moving, but it's just, we could have these conversations for much longer. But I would ask, could you share with us some things that have guided your life of who Professor Siphamandla Zondi is, and maybe there's some things that you would also share with us that would be beneficial to not just our life, but even our work. Like, how do we find significance in our work that we do? So let's talk about that first. So let's go back. Let's talk about how to find the significance in our work, and then I'll let you come back to the things for your life. So how do I find significance? Like, I know who I am. I know what I can do. I have some abilities. How do I find the significance in that? How can I make impact and influence others?
That's an epochal question. That's a huge and complex question.
I give it to you, Professor. You've got it.
Because there's quite a number of things that come to mind. One is that it is better that a human being understand what their purpose is. Then work is meaningful. It's meaningful because it's full of the meaning which is ascribed to it by the purpose. Meaning to anything is ascribed to that thing by the purpose of that thing. So meaningful living will be ascribed by the purpose for my living. And for as long as I'm living away from my purpose, the meaning for my work is limited and at best really dependent on temporary factors, such as salary, such as adulation, or such as reputation, such as accords, awards, honor by other people. I'm best honored by the knowledge that what I am doing is part of my purpose, or is the pursuit of purpose, which is why I've been heavily influenced by Dr. Mars's book, The Pursuit of Purpose, because it is absolutely a book that everybody must read, because it reminds us that The purpose for living gives meaning to living. And the pleasure in living will come from that meaning in living. And even rewards, true rewards for my living will come from that purpose that I have. But I accept that many people will take time to discover their purpose. But at least while they're waiting for their purpose to be fully clear to them, they must at least know what their passion is. It is not very hard to know whether I'm passionate about working with young people from poor areas, or I am more passionate with working with influential, senior, rich people, trying to influence them. Or I am very passionate about working with machines and stuff. I must find what it is that I'm passionate about and try to find work that relates to my passion, so that my work doesn't take me from my passion, so that I don't have to do my passion after work, but I do my passion while I am working. And that is what I'm very fortunate to have found, to really do work that employs me, that pays me my wages, but it is in my area of passion. So I am really passionate about it. If you would, that would not still help. If you would find the principles by which you want to live, and do work that relates, that enhances the principles that by which you live. Say you believe that people need to be helped, those who do not have help. Then you do work, social work, doing teaching, students and stuff like that. That helps you to do that. It will help to do it. I don't want to say, that it will only be meaningful once you found purpose, because I know sometimes finding purpose takes a long time. If those things would not work, then April, I think what might help is for people to use their talent optimally, whatever their talent is, because I've often found that one of the few talents I have is a gift. Not all the talents I have are a gift, but many of the talents, I have many talents, but I have one gift. Sometimes one of the talents I have is closest to my gift. It's my route to finding my gift. So I better simply exercise all the talents until I find which one is linked to my passion and therefore closer to my gift. I think for me, if we're able to try and do those things, then work will not be a struggle, will not be a burden, but it will be joy. Whether it pays well or doesn't pay well, the biggest pay is connection with my purpose. And because money will follow. So the Bible talks about find first the kingdom and its righteousness. All these things will be added to you. What is kingdom in this case is for me to be a king in the area I'm designed to be in. That's kingdom. It's for me to be a king in hip hop art, because that is where I am designed to be. That is kingdom. And all these other things, and to do it righteously, and all these other things will be added to me. And we've seen it. The greatest people in the world did not have the best jobs, were not CEOs of anything, but they were CEOs of their lives and their purpose. And that is what paid them.
Wow. Wow. So it's taking notes. Meaningful living comes from purpose. What you're doing should be a part of your purpose. Once you find your purpose, find meaning in that purpose, and it leads to pleasure, it leads to rewards, but it first starts with your purpose. And you talked about finding your gift, and the clues come from your talents. So when you begin to utilize your talents, optimize your talents, you then find and hone the gift that's within you. And your gift is linked to your passion. So you know what it is you like to do. You love working with youth, or you love working with government leaders, or it could be taking care of the elderly or persons that have learning abilities, or food scarcity. So there's a lot of different passions that people have, and that passion, and we know that people would ask, Dr. Moore often, how do you find your purpose? He's like, what do you love doing? And then what do you hate to see? What keeps you up at night? And for him, it certainly was to let the global south, the third world, the emerging, so many different names now, Professor, right? Emerging developing countries. But it was these countries that had been colonized, marginalized, the association, right? Leaders of the association to champion the cause that each of us was created as leaders. So people ask, are leaders born or are they made? Guess what? You have to be born first. So yes, leaders are born and they're made. But to bring all of that together to say that regardless of your history, right, Sankofa, we're looking back, history tells us that maybe we could be less than or treated as left out of access to education and opportunity. But our purpose, our God-ordained purpose for creation tells us of our significance. That God said he brought nothing in Genesis 2, no rain came on the earth because there was no mankind, I put women in there, so mankind, to manage it. So God created us to manage the resources. So each of us have different talents that lend to the gift of resource management. Well, Professor, I tell you, today has been nothing short of extraordinary. And the information that you shared with us has been profound, enlightening, and I hope for each listener, very transformative. But if you were looking back at the boy that you were, what would you say to the boy that you were?
If I was looking at?
If you were looking, so what would the man that you are today say to the boy that you were?
It's another difficult one.
Yeah.
The boy, the man still has elements of the boy in them. The boy was adventurous. The boy had space and time to explore, trying to do what they're passionate about and also what they're good at. The boy learned by doing and tried out different things that would work for them. But the man has come to understand the importance and the strategic value of knowing your purpose and not be distracted by all sorts of attractive things that are out there and greater opportunities and what looks like the better things, and then pursue what is in one's purpose and understanding one's passion and understanding the principles that work for me as opposed to principles that might work for the other. So the man is a little assured about what they're supposed to do, but the man still has the circumstances of the boy that is not quite sure what the environment will bring next. He's not also quite sure how the people around him will change over time. He's also definitely not fully sure that the purpose for which he is living will attract others to also do what they're supposed to do. So the outcomes are not fully certain, but the pursuit must still happen, because the certainty about purpose means that I don't have to know everything. I don't have to have a 360-degree view of the thing. Sometimes I must trust my knowledge of the purpose, my consciousness about what needs to be done. And often I'm wiser when I look back, because hindsight may be a better teacher. But before I have insight with the shortest form of knowledge, I must hang on other forms of sight. I must hang on the insight, which is the understanding of my purpose and what I need to do and what is possible right now. And really hang on my foresight, which is an inkling and a sort of sense about what might be and what is possible. And the foresight works for me because it works for me on the basis that if I use principles that are tried and tested, the principles are able to help me anticipate the routes I take if there are routes that would work. If you think about it, the principle of generosity tells you that you will have a circle of people and networks and stakeholders that you can then use later on to generate whatever value you want to generate. Now, the principle of making friends and contributing positive to other people helps me to anticipate what future I might have, even though the future is not predictable, but on the basis of principle, I can work out that if I live my life this way and contribute to others this way, this is what is likely to wait for me down the road. So principles help me to live tomorrow on the basis of today.
Principles help me live tomorrow on the basis of today.
Yeah.
That's a smart young man on his way somewhere to make global impact, transformative impact. Insight and foresight. Principles allow us to anticipate the routes that we need in order to fulfill our purpose. Thank you, Professor. I'm still taking today all in. This has been poignant, salient truths, practical insights, but transformative lessons about leadership, purpose, community, the world house, the global village. And certainly we just thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your gift with us, for serving it to the world. Thank you for the work that you're doing there in the nation of South Africa and the nation of Barbados, but around the world, that your impact is felt. And so we thank you for being our guest today on Exceptional Living. God bless you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, and God will do the same thing to you as well. It was a pleasure joining you on this podcast.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in today. This has been an amazing broadcast. I will go back and listen to this again myself because there were so many truths, so many things imparted to us today. And we learn by doing. There was so much that he said. We learn by doing. Understanding our purpose guides us, keeps us focused, and also charts a path, our journeyed path. And we know that when we follow principles, especially biblical principles that are time tested and proven, guess what happens? Our future is assured. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and especially like and share this broadcast. And until our next time together, remember that you were created to stand out, to live an exceptional life, unique by design. Thank you for joining us. God bless.